Welcome to Facing Your Fears podcast, where we talk about facing the fears we encounter in education as teachers, students, administrators, and parents while finding our inner confidence to thrive. I'm your host, Amanda Alford, and today we are discussing facing your fears of failure from a student's perspective with our guest, Calleigh Powell. Calleigh is a senior at Switzerland County High School, as well as a student athlete. Calleigh, thank you so much for joining me today. I appreciate you taking out the time. Please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, of course. Hey guys, first off, thank you for having me. As you know, I'm a senior in high school, and I'm actually working to complete my associate's degree in general studies, as well as a technical certificate in business administration through Ivy Tech with my high school. I played basketball, soccer, and I ran track throughout my entire 4 years. And now sports are over for me, but I'm actually currently recovering after undergoing hip surgery in January after an injury in our sectional championship soccer game. As for college, I have decided to actually attend Western Kentucky University to double major in broadcasting and marketing with a minor in journalism.
All right, so broadcasting, this is right up your alley. This is episode 2 of Facing Your Fears. And as I said, today we are discussing the fear of failure from a student's perspective and what kind of pressure that has on students, not only in the classroom, but also as an athlete. So Calleigh, what would you say are some common fears students and student athletes face, especially when it comes to the pressure of failure?
As a senior, I actually think I see things from a little different perspective because I've had 4 years of experiencing this idea of failing. Now, of course, you guys can't see this, but I put air quotes around this because I think that the word fail evokes such a negative connotation, and it doesn't necessarily need to or deserve that. It's such a pivotal part of who we are as students and student athletes. And I think some common fears that every student is going to face as far as academically is bound to have, I know as I am, different parts of the journey than everyone else. But my fear mostly comes from not living up to the expectations of others. All my life, I've been a very driven student, and there has been times I have felt that I was doing everything wrong. I have bombarded myself with extra classes when I wasn't even understanding what was going on in the ones I was in right now. And everything else just seemed to come crashing down. I couldn't keep up, and that ended with grades that I wasn't happy with myself. And I feel like failure is a perfect word to describe the way I felt at that time. Now, as a student, I think not only us, but also our teachers, parents, and guardians had these expectations on how we should perform academically. And when we missed them, even by a little, we let that feeling of not being good enough bring us the rest of the way down. I know for me, expectations always scared me because the thought of disappointing someone based on how I performed in school was actually terrifying. But as time went on and I began to grow more as a person, I realized that expectations are what keep me motivated. It's what allows us to create a sense of drive and purpose. But I was looking at them all the wrong way. I saw expectations more negatively because I felt that I had one shot to do everything right. When instead, I should have seen it as an opportunity to do it right the first time, and if I mess up, well, at least now I know what to do better next time around.
That sounds great. It definitely has the whole, you're not letting failure define you, you're letting failure teach you and seeing it as a teaching opportunity, which is fabulous. And I love everything that you said. So as you just said, you personally have faced some of these fears. So can you give us a couple of stories, maybe as a student in the classroom and as an athlete, how you have faced these fears of failure that you talk so strongly about?
Yeah, I think as for a student athlete, I think failure has actually played more of an impactful role. I think when you're an athlete, you're not only worried about how you perform, but you're also how your performance is going to affect the rest of your team. And I think that's true for every sport. For myself, a huge fear I've always had is when it comes to competing is just letting the fear of letting the rest of my team down or being the reason that we may lose a game or something like that. But when it comes down to it, no athlete, whether you're professional or just high school, you aren't going to have a perfect game every single time you step onto the court or field. And it's the process of realizing that and accepting that you aren't always going to give the performance you want, and that's okay. At the end of every game, or match or meet, you need to be able to tell yourself that you did what you could, or, you did what was best for your team. I ran as hard as I could. I played my best defense. You can only control the things that you have control over. And when you're an athlete, you have to realize this. Now, as for me, personally, I would say I've experienced failure in almost every aspect of my life, in at least some way. And I want to share two that I think have helped shape my perception of failing. As a student, I mentioned earlier that I'm working toward my associate's degree. And this may seem like a huge accomplishment, and don't get me wrong, I feel as if it is just as much. But getting to this point has required me to step back and refocus more times than I can even count. Senior year is usually seen as your easy, laid-back year. You're getting ready to graduate, you're making memories with your best friends, and at the same time, I was spending every single night in my room, stressed so much I was crying, and completely just overwhelmed. I'm not telling you this to scare you away from adding extra classes to your schedule or getting a college degree while you're in high school, because it is extremely important, and financially it has been a huge help for college. But I'm telling you because people see that I'm getting my degree and they think that I have it all together. Oh wow, she must know what she's doing with her life. She must be so smart, and I'm here to tell you that I have thought about quitting about 100 times, dropping out of these extra classes and doing what is minimum for me to graduate. And once again, I was approaching everything the exact wrong way. When I was getting stressed and bombarded with homework, I already felt like I was failing before I even gave myself a chance. I would watch TV instead because I felt like, what's the point? I'll just do it later. Me changing my perception made it easier to accept what was later to come. I do not think I've ever been more let down when it comes to academics until this year when I was taking tests to get into colleges. I took my ACT, I got a 24, which is a decent score, above average. I visited WKU, my dream school, and realized that I was 1 point away from maintaining scholarship money. So I decided I was going to retake it, and I was going to study, I was going to do better, I was going to get a 25, take some pressure off my shoulders. Well, I chose not to study. I won the test, and my results were a complete reflection of that. Instead of raising my score, I actually lowered my score to a 23. I got my results, I was mad at myself, and I felt as if I was failing in every aspect of my life then too. I didn't study, so I'm not really sure what I expected. I had no choice but just to accept the responsibility because who else was to blame but me? Time went on, and I decided to give it my last try. And this is actually the last time colleges, right before they stop accepting scores. I spent hours studying, practicing math problems over and over again. I took the test. I felt so confident, I can't even explain. I got into the car, I told my mom, I was like, that was definitely the best test I've ever taken. I had to have at least gotten a 25, probably even higher. I was feeling like a 30. In my stomach, I knew I had gotten a better score. And I got my scores back about 2 weeks later. And I can't really explain the feeling or the drop that I had in my stomach when I read a 24 on the screen. Again. I had failed again, right? No, you see, I hadn't failed. I knew I did my best, and in the end, it just didn't happen for me. In that moment, I had a choice. I had a choice to let one test score define me. I had a choice to let that 24 make me feel less of a student. I had a choice, and I chose to let it fuel me to apply for every single scholarship possible. It fueled me to try harder. I may have not gotten the score I wanted, but I learned so much from experiencing failure not just once, but 3 times. And I think this is true for every student. College is a very stressful time. And if you're not looking into college, you're going for athletics, or you focus in athletics in high school right now, high school student athletes, failing in a sport scares us more than anything. And I think for me, it scares me more failing in a sport than it does academically. And I don't think that's how it should be, but I want to be honest with you. I think a lot of times we're pushed to prioritize sports over education, and that's 100% not how it should be, but sometimes it's just how we approach things. As a junior, I was a captain for the girls' varsity soccer team. Soccer is my main sport, and I would say it's going to be what I miss most about high school. But junior year was a little rough. Not only was school dragging me down, and when I say dragging me down, I mean dragging me down bad. I felt every time I stepped onto the field, I was being blamed for something I literally had no control over. I even thought about not playing and just playing for a travel league. I remember one game in particular, I came off the field feeling so nice and so accomplished, even though we lost, but because I scored and I felt like I had been a good teammate, I was happy. My coach looked me in the eyes and he said, "Calleigh, you're doing too much." I literally had no idea what to say. I felt like I had been doing all I could, and I was even failing at that. I sat in my car, I let myself be upset for about 30 minutes. I cried, I went and got Roxano's, got some breadsticks, got mad at my coach, and then I realized he's right. I can't really do more because I was doing all I could, but I needed to take what I'm doing and make it work for other people, not just me. I came to practice with a better attitude, and we went on a 5-game winning streak. Not just because of me, but I was a leader on that team. I had to recognize that, and I had a job to do, and I couldn't let failing define me and bring myself and everyone else on the team down with me.
And I love how you really emphasize that, especially with athletics. I'm a coach. I just came from practice, and the one thing that I emphasize to all of my athletes, and you really hit it on the head, was you're a student first and an athlete second. And sometimes I feel as a coach that I put too much pressure on my athletes because it is a game.
Yeah.
It's a game, and school, I feel, is their future, not just playing a game. I love sports. I love being a coach. And I know you love being an athlete, but when it comes down to it, the education is what we're here for, and that's what we need to focus on. And I really love how you hit that. So with all the empowering things that you just said, I know that there are students out there who feel the exact same way that you do. They've gone through this. They may be going through it now. What advice can you share to other students who are facing these fears as you just went over?
Yeah, first thing I want to say is just breathe. I think I forget that all the time because a whirlwind of things are happening, especially your senior year. Before I knew it, I was a senior. I just got my cap and gown yesterday, and I was like, what the heck? How did this get here? And I feel like I have been so stressed and overwhelmed with this idea and concept of failing and not being good enough that I've kind of let it embody who I was for a little bit until I understood and learned how to perceive failure in a different way. And a quote I recently found that I want to share embodies the way I perceive the idea of failure now. And the quote reads, "Failure is not the opposite of success. It is a part of the success." And I think if you change your perception of failing, then you won't hear the word and you won't automatically become overwhelmed with a negative feeling. And I think sometimes changing the way you think can be an extremely draining process. But I mean, starting small is always the way to go. Little failures like a bad test grade, losing a game, running late. I mean, I used to see those things as detrimental. But if you let those serve as a guide to knowing that you need to put more time aside for studying, or if you lose a game, evaluate what you went wrong and bring it to your team's attention and continue grinding to get that win the next time. If you don't get anything from this podcast as a student, please get this. Failure is not permanent. I know it may sound weird, but embrace it. Embrace coming up short. In order to learn from it, you have to understand and recognize that it even happens. No one, and I mean no one, succeeds without failing first.
And I love that so much. It really brings home the whole acronym of fail is really just first attempt and learning.
I agree.
So thank you so much, Calleigh, for joining me today. Thank you for listening to the second episode of Facing Your Fears podcast. I'm your host, Amanda Alford. If you like my show and want to know more, please follow me on Twitter at Alford_science. And please leave me a review. Join me next week for episode 3 when we talk about facing your fears of failure from a varsity coach's perspective with my guest, Adam Pietrzakowski. Adam has coached varsity football and varsity track, both guys and gals, all the way to state levels. And so he's going to come in and share what kind of pressure he has gone under and what fails he has feared from a coach's perspective. Thank you, and hopefully see you again next week.